new global talk show, Newstellers. Let's meet our panelists. Are there any stories in particular that you remember from recently?
I remember Stephen recently did a story about Yuan and how the former dictator is trying to be forgotten. I think it was a pretty good story. I liked it.
And Jason and me did a story about Henia around the same time, right?
Yeah, I've been working on it. I'm still something I'm working on for this radio station back in the US.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 trips to Jeju-do recently.
Well,
not a bad excuse to visit Jeju-do, actually.
Well, shall we get into today's 2 topics? We're going to be talking about China's yuan, named as a world reserve currency, and Christmas controversy. The International Monetary Fund has decided to add the Chinese yuan to its special drawing rights currency basket. China's inclusion will allow it to withdraw funds from the international financial body without collateral when faced with a fiscal crisis. Once added in October 2016, the yuan will become the 5th SDR currency after the US dollar, the euro, British pound, and Japanese yen. The yuan will have a roughly 11% share of the basket, and the IMF's recent decision will allow the yuan to become one of the top 3 major international currencies, a peer to the US dollar and the euro. With the establishment of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the inclusion of the Chinese yuan as a world reserve currency, China's influence is expected to increase in the future. So the rapid growth in China helped put the yuan under the global market spotlight, especially in the light of the international financial crisis. So how did China's economic power help legitimize the yuan as a world major currency?
Well, I think China is a process of liberalizing their currency. The economy of China has been dominated by the state from years and years, and the currency was like really, it was back to the dollar first, and then it was more liberalized, and they are taking steps. And the next step is this one, making the currency inside in the SDR basket. But some analysts say that the real effect on the economy is not that big, but it has a lot of political influences on it, like for example about the dollar. And
it's a good ego boost for the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, they've wanted this for decades, really, to have this type of international recognition. But the problem is the Chinese economy has slowed down. I read not since levels from 1990. So, you know, the boom that propelled China to this economic state of development is no more. It's declining. There's $1 trillion of debt. Beijing really had to jump through a lot of loops in order to get the IMF to recognize the yuan as one of its top currencies. Namely, they had to stop artificially manipulating the value of their currency and let it appreciate against the dollar. There were a lot of accusations over the years, namely from Washington, that China was keeping the value of their currency quite low in order to boost exports.
Right.
So at least those days seem to be over now.
It was more in their interest for the yuan to become a major currency in the world.
I mean, I think we should be careful. It's a major currency mainly because a lot of international payments are made in yuan, because now Chinese economy is so big and like China is exporting its products everywhere in the world. But in terms of financial transaction, there is not many yuan deposits outside of China.
Okay.
I mean, the total of the amount of yuan renminbi deposit outside of China, I think it's approximately the same amount as the size of the Thailand marketization, at the Thailand capital market.
Okay.
So it's not that big. Yeah. Investors are still very worried. They don't want to use, they know that there is too much control on the yuan by the Chinese government. So it's not a money trust by financial investors.
Okay, so it's more symbolic, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so.
I think for all the growth that's been seen in the Chinese economy, there's still a lack of trust over the stability. Like over the summer, we saw a really serious stock market crash in China. And if you read the news out of China, like most rich Chinese people are leaving the country, are keeping their savings denominated in some other currency. So I think maybe part of the Chinese government's motivation here is having a kind of international legitimacy and shoring up trust in their economy.
And also all the steps that the Chinese government takes in terms of currency and economy are like very slow and cautious steps. If we see the history of China in the last 20 years, all the steps that they took towards the liberalization of the economy and the liberalization of currency were like very small steps. And they try a little bit and they see how it works and they take another step. It happened when they linked the Shanghai stock market with the Hong Kong one, and they just see what it happens, and then they take the next step. So in this regard, I think it's another step, and then finally we will see the total liberalization of Chinese currency in probably in less than 10 years.
Okay, so there's still quite a way to go.
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen.
Right. I mean, look, from what I understand, it took Japan about 40 years to get the yen to the level that it is now globally traded. And as soon as they were able to achieve that, they went into a pretty much a 2-decade-long recession. So right, and China has probably a considerable, greater distance to go than Japan did at the same time.
But maybe now China is more in a hurry and it's in a different situation. China still has a lot of path to grow, and it's going to be the #1 powerhouse in maybe the next 10, 20 years. I don't really know. So they have to get ready for being the #1. And one of the steps, I guess, is the total liberalization of currency and compete in equal conditions in the foreign markets.
Well, I think a big part of China becoming a #1 player is moving from an export model to a model that's fueled by domestic consumption. And so I guess with that sort of a framework in mind, having a cheap currency that will make its exports less expensive is less of a priority to the Chinese leadership. So, but nowadays in China, like the employment numbers don't look very good. Like there's a lot of economic indicators that are not promising. So I think the next 5 years or so will be a pivotal time to see if China can transition from being what was called the world's factory, producing cheap and often low quality goods for the outside world, and seeing if the country's middle class can fuel sustained economic growth.
Sure. I mean, you still have several 100 million people that live in poverty in China. It has a really long way to go, and it's facing major demographic issues, not enough young people to support the pension class of people. You have other economic indicators that aren't really positive in China's favor. So a lot could happen over the next decade or so that would hinder its progress in liberalizing its economy.
So there are a lot of problems still socially and economically as well, but there is also potential for growth. And given that the IMF has added the Chinese yuan as a world reserve currency, do you see the yuan at some point challenging the global supremacy of the dollar, or do you think this move will have a small impact?
Short answer, no.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of the world economy is still the reserve currency is still the U.S. dollar, and we see in times of economic upheaval, like during the economic crisis of 2008, 2009, even though the sort of epicenter of that crisis was the U.S., the U.S. dollar value increased significantly over that time because, there's that old saying about the financial markets is what motivates people is greed and fear. So the U.S. dollar is still far and away seen as the most stable, the most reliable currency, and I don't see that changing.
But we have to say that there are fears. A lot of experts and economists, they fear that the Chinese yuan can eventually go over the dollar in the market. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. The economy of the European Union, for example, is bigger than the economy of the US, but still the dollar has more weight than the euro. In the case of the yuan overpassing the dollar, it should be, I think, in decades, maybe. We don't know. And maybe it's not a bad thing. Also, we have to see. We have to see what
But
happens.
it could happen.
It could happen, I guess.
Well, a lot of things could happen, but yeah, I mean, of course, the U.S. hasn't done itself any favors in recent years with all the infighting in Congress and the fears of, government shutdowns and the inability for politicians to agree on budgets and the debt ceiling. So that, of course, installs a lot of fear into the global markets. But still, like my colleagues have said, that when it comes to trust, I think the U.S. still has an open enough policy, economic policies, that global investors will continue to rely on the dollar. I mean, we've seen the euro in the 13 or so years that the euro has been the currency of most of the European Union. We've seen it fluctuate up and down. It's still, that is still not a very reliable currency. And same, the British pound is stable, and Japan has its own economic issues that has made the yen very volatile in recent years. So, right, the dollar still is kind of the linchpin of the world economy.
Okay.
Most of the analysts I've read were saying that it was like this IMF decision was basically a non-event.
Right.
And it's too like in 2 years, I think, in terms of international payments, the Yuan used to amount to 1%, and in 2 years it went up to 2.5%. But still, that's similar to the level of Canadian dollar or Australian dollar. It's not that much so far. Yuan is not a widely traded currency, and as my colleague said, I don't think it will change in the short term.
Most of our panel agreed that the Chinese yuan won't be overtaking the US dollar anytime soon.
No, I agree with that too. No,
Okay.
it's not going to happen anytime soon for sure.
All right, all right. How about in Korea, though? I mean, Korea is very economically interconnected with China. So what kind of impact do you think that this move by the IMF will have on the Korean economy?
Sure. Well, we just saw a deal made recently where South Korea will be able to trade about $460 million worth of Chinese currency and bonds in China. Evidently, this is the first time this kind of deal has ever been struck, and that will, from what I understand, will benefit Korean companies operating in China and give South Korea more access to Chinese currency, hopefully, as it appreciates over the years.
Well, actually, we cannot forget that China and Korea, they are partners and competitors at the same time. So it can be a double effect. Probably Korea will buy a lot of foreign reserves in Chinese yuan, and also it will influence the trade because maybe it can be Korean products more expensive or less expensive to sell to China, or the other way around, or it's going to be like really difficult to predict that, I guess.
I think in some ways, whatever is good for the Chinese economy is also good for the South Korean economy, because a lot of this is still a very export-oriented economy, and a lot of companies rely on demand from China. And over the past year or two, we've seen falling demand from China, which has hit a lot of industries pretty hard. So I think if this can be a move that, like, over the long term will do something to shore up the long-term viability of the Chinese economy, then that will be good for South Korea.
We've seen South Korea, do a very clever balancing act between its economic relations with the United States and the People's Republic of China. A few years back, South Korea signed a free trade deal with the U.S., the Chorus FTA, that has given South Korean companies access, more exclusive access to the U.S. market and vice versa. And now South Korea and China are approaching the ratification of their own free trade deal. So yeah, I think Korea has always had to play this balancing act between much bigger powers, bigger economies, and continues to do so.
Okay. So with so many factors at play in China, in Korea, around the world, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens and whether this actually paves the way for a much broader use of the Chinese yuan in the global financial markets. Shall we wrap up our first topic then, China's yuan named as a world reserve currency, with some headlines?
My headline will be, for the time being, keep your savings in something other than yuan.
Okay, okay. So there's some time to go. Thanks.
I'm not a financial expert, so my headline would be pretty basic. I would say China, growing economy, rising currency.
Okay, so keeping it pretty general.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So Christmas is just around the corner, but things are looking very different around the world this year. So let's take a look at this video clip and find out why. Christmas is one of the biggest celebrations of the year, but following the shocking terror attacks in Paris, the Christmas period will be a very difficult time for many people in Europe. Traditionally, Christmas markets take place across European cities starting in mid-November. It's a great way to enjoy the celebrations during the holiday period. But in light of the recent terror attacks in the French capital, few are in the mood to celebrate. Christmas markets draw in huge crowds, and the possibility of an additional terror attack is high. With the extra precautions and heightened security, a shadow has been cast over this year's festivities. So in the aftermath of the Paris terror attacks and these heightened concerns over the possibility of another attack over the Christmas period, it's put a bit of a dampener on this year's festivities. What are these situations like in your respective countries right now? Should we start off with France?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there is a darker mood this year in France, but I think people try to, life goes on. They will not change their habit. And I think it's mostly in Paris. I come from a small city where the risk of terrorism is pretty low.
Okay.
So I think the effect on people is not very strong. But even in Paris, I think they don't want to change their lifestyle because of terrorist attack, and I think there is a bit of a resistance spirit, like the idea of continuing to do as usual.
Yeah, I think that's a great response to the attacks as well.
Yeah, well, in Spain we have some concerns also because France is very close and we had terrorist attacks before. So people is concerned. There's a lot of security, but basically people is not that the authorities are concerned. People is a little bit concerned. But basically, the people is just trying to enjoy Christmas every year. We have a kind of a Catholic background, and even if most of people is not really religious in Spain, we still have those traditions of Christmas and those Christian Catholic symbols that people enjoy, and families get together to have good food and drinks. And it's a very happy time in our country, I can say.
Well, sadly, like in France and the US right now, there's kind of a shadow looming over the holiday season. Of course, there was this mass shooting at a end-of-the-year party in San Bernardino, California, earlier this month, which I would think now is making a lot of people reflect upon their end-of-the-year gatherings, and perhaps we will see heightened security at these type of festivities. It's a shame, but this, for years now, and especially since September 11th, 2001, the holidays always raises concerns in public spaces, or in New York, where you will have tens of thousands of people coming out on New Year's Eve for watching the ball drop at Times Square. So this time of year always, there's an increased concern over security.
Well, sometimes on our show, when I'm asked about Canada, I have a tough time answering and making it sound interesting. Christmas in Canada is a really nice, warm. Sorry, I shouldn't say warm. It's actually very cold, but it's very festive, and it's a great time of year for people to get together. There's every night of the week you can go to a different person or a different organization is having their Christmas party, and you can have cookies and drinks and eggnog and all this other stuff. So I'm not a religious person at all, but I'm not really all that family-oriented of a person either, but I do really enjoy Christmas. I always find it's a nice time to have relaxed and pleasant times with people.
So there are concerns over the Christmas period, but we shouldn't let those fears overcome the festivities.
That's how the terrorists win.
Indeed, indeed. We can't let them do that. Talking about religion, it was mentioned briefly. A lot of people are saying happy holidays rather than Merry Christmas around this time of year. They think that the latter phrase could be offensive to people of other religions or other cultures, and they're trying to show more sensitivity towards those cultures. Other people dislike the fact that these religious roots of Christmas are being denied. What are your thoughts on the situation?
I mean, for some time now in the US, saying happy holidays is a political statement to some. I mean, you have conservative pundits, talk show hosts that annually go on this rampage about the war on Christmas, and how people saying happy holidays somehow an affront to people's religious beliefs. I mean, look, I come from an area where it is very diverse. I went to school with Jewish classmates. I had Jewish friends. I had Muslim friends. And, they have holidays too around this time of year. So I think even though I'm not personally religious, but I am more inclined to say happy holidays just as a general statement for the end of the year, which is now if I have a friend that I know celebrates Christmas, perhaps I will say to him or her, Merry Christmas. But otherwise, Happy Holidays, I feel, is a more convenient blanket statement.
Yeah, I think it depends on who you're talking to. Like, if you're talking to a person that actually celebrates Christmas within the Christian tradition, then it makes sense to say Merry Christmas. But if you're not everybody celebrates Christmas, but almost everybody takes some kind of holiday. Like if you're in a Western country, your company probably has some kind of shut down or some time off, even though some time off around this time of year, even if not everybody celebrates Christmas. So I think saying happy holidays is actually more relevant to more people's experiences.
Well, actually, we never had that issue in Spain or France, so I was very surprised that it got a political or religious issue to say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays in the US, in the land of the politically correct thing. And well, in Spain we said both, like Feliz Navidad, Felices Fiestas, but I never thought that it could be like a different opinion, religious or not. There was a controversy in Spain about some public institutions that they didn't want to pay for like the figures of Jesus Christ and whatever, which are traditional and part of the Christmas environment or the Christmas decoration. But it was something really, really small. Not really many people were talking about it. And I think everybody celebrates Christmas in Spain. Yes, they are religious or not religious.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm growing a little bit tired of being politically correct all the time. And I'm same with Atta in France. We say Happy Christmas because our culture is deeply influenced by Christianity, and many people are Christian, even though they are not Christian anymore. They still meet. But to tell the truth, after preparing this show, I started to say more happy holidays and happy Christmas, to Merry Christmas to people in Korea. Right. Because in Korea, it's true that only 30% of people are Christians, and I never thought I might hurt some people by saying Happy Christmas, Merry Christmas. So I say happy holidays now. Okay,
well, Christmas was traditionally a Christian celebration, but it's long since gone beyond Christianity. It's become this universal celebration, hasn't it? More of a cultural holiday, generally a time for coming together with family as well. There was recently a really heartwarming Christmas advert released by the German supermarket Edeka. It shows this elderly man who spent several Christmases alone, just hoping that one day he'll be able to spend it with his family. So family is an important aspect for many at Christmas. What does Christmas mean to you guys?
Well, as journalists, I think...
Holidays!
Well, that's a boring way to enter that.
As journalists, I have to say that the Christmas means a lot of free food and drink, which is awesome, especially before Christmas itself. We have a lot of events, a lot of dinners to go to, and a lot of social meetings. Yeah,
it's often a time, like I think all of us this week and next week before actual Christmas, we have a lot of things that we need to wrap up.
Right.
We have like little stories that we want to, our editors may ask us to kind of file things in advance so they can run things over the holidays. But for the meaning of Christmas, I would think about the movie Home Alone, which is one of my favorite movies ever. But there's this serious
uncanny
and touching part at the end where the creepy old guy who salts the sidewalks, he tells that story to Macaulay Culkin's character about how he hasn't seen his family in a very long time.
Yeah.
And Macaulay Culkin just kind of encourages him, well, why don't you call him? Why don't you get together with him? And then there's that scene at the end where his son and his family are arriving at his house and they're hugging, and it's very touching. So I think that scene captures the spirit of Christmas, of getting together with people. In my family and in many families, there are people who sometimes don't like each other, sometimes have conflict, but Christmas is a time to put those aside and just enjoy some time together.
You guys might not be aware of this, but I grew up working on a Christmas tree farm. The vast Struthers family fortune was made on selling Scotch pines and Douglas firs during the holiday season. So Christmas has some nostalgic memories for me. I mean, in high school, I was cutting down these trees and putting them on top of cars for our customers, and I was not entirely excited about going to a Christmas Eve dinner with my extended family, but in the end, it wasn't bad. I had very nice food and some not too awkward conversations with relatives who I hadn't seen in a very long time.
So various meanings to Christmas amongst our panel. So it's a time of well-deserved rest for some of us.
Yes.
Spending time with friends or family or loved ones, making new memories for the next generation. So Christmas can mean a lot of things to Christians. They celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ, but I think even if you don't have a particular religion, you can always partake in the festivities, which is nice. So whatever part of the world you're from, I hope, and from our panel as well, I hope you have a wonderful holiday. And shall we wrap up our second discussion, Christmas controversy, with our final headlines?
Okay, no matter what your belief is, enjoy good food and wine this Christmas.
Very Spanish headline.
What I can say is Christmas. It's a holiday for everyone.
Indeed, it is. So thank you to my panel for a wonderful discussion today. I hope you all have a fantastic holiday. I hope our viewers do too, and join us again for a whole new global talk show, Newstellers. We will be open for any opinions or requests on our official website as well as our Facebook page. What are your plans for the winter holidays?
Well, I will stay here in Korea. I will
Okay.
enjoy Christmas here. I like Christmas in Korea.
I'm trying to think of a creative way to spend Christmas and New Year's here in Korea. Usually I'm out around this time of year.
I will go back to France.
Okay.
Enjoy family time, babies and kids running everywhere. Good wine, good food. It'd be nice.
Well, I'm going back to Canada. What I'm telling people is even though it's going to be cold, it'll be figuratively warm in Canada. All the company and everybody there.
that's
and
sweet.
it is sweet. It's